Hi everybody, welcome to another video. In this video I'm going to take apart one of the latest videos from Russell Brand. So I guess without further ado, let's get going. Oh great, is it doing his constant pose with his hands up? I don't know what he's doing. He constantly looked like he's trying to maybe put himself in some kind of messiah position. I don't know, but it's weird. Okay, let's get going.
Tucker Carlson has called Jon Stewart a tool of the establishment, where Jon Stewart thinks that Tucker is just, well, a tool.
Okay, right, okay, already something there to work with. Okay, so Tucker Carlson's criticism of Jon Stewart is that he's a tool of the establishment, which is, we're not speaking specifically about Jon Stewart, but directed against somebody. That would be a legitimate criticism. Whereas the criticism that Russell Brand places on Jon Stewart is just an ad hominem attack. So Jon Stewart's criticism of Tucker Carlson is just this ad hominem, and Tucker Carlson's criticism of Jon Stewart is something that's likely to resonate more with his listeners. Already shows you the bias that he's subtly trying to develop here.
In this phony polarisation and culture war, are we missing the real message here?
So it's a phony polarisation war. So the person who's polarising is bad, right?
That both these anti-establishment figures have...
What? Sorry, both of these anti-establishment figures. These anti-establishment figures. Okay, well, I mean, it's probably worth remembering that Tucker Carlson was the most popular lead anchor for Fox News, the largest news network in America, possibly the world, probably the world. So, I mean, how exactly is he anti-establishment? He spent his entire career trumpeting Republican talking points, so that's an unusual claim.
Have more to teach us than anyone from the homogenised uni-party authoritarian centre.
Okay, so he doesn't like the homogenized center ground, and he has criticisms of the left. The only area that he doesn't ever seem to criticize is the right, despite claiming not to be of the right.
Hello there, you Awakening Wonders. Thanks for joining us on our voyage to truth and freedom. Remember, you can support our movement.
Yeah, I'd really rather that you didn't.
By clicking the link in the description. We regularly talk to important figures, journalists, politicians, who help us to become educated beyond the remit of our custodians and jailers
Yes. Okay.
in the maelstream. Surely this is an important moment where a figure like Tucker Carlson, despised and loathed on the left, but
Despised and loathed on the left, okay.
adored by many.
By many. On the right-wing people like him, do they?
And Tucker Carlson, let me say it outright, out front. I can see
What? You didn't, okay. You're not attributing, okay. That seems a strange omission to make on one side, but then not the other.
him to be my friend.
You consider Tucker Carlson to be your friend, do you? Okay, so, but this is who Tucker Carlson is.
Iraq is a crappy place filled with a bunch of, semi-literate primitive monkeys. But I just have zero sympathy for them or their culture, a culture where people just don't use toilet paper or forks.
Let's hear from a literal former grand wizard of white supremacists, David Duke. He's not only tweeted approvingly about Tucker in the past, saying Tucker is right and can't cuck the tuck. Duke even has a podcast where he sometimes just recaps Tucker's segments from the night before.
So this is David Duke, the former leader of the KKK and known white supremacist.
Last year, when endorsing Trump for president, Duke even suggested that Tucker Carlson should be his VP, explaining Tucker's value to the white supremacist cause like this.
And he doesn't use the word white very often, but that's the underlying message that he's showing. And he shows that there is massive racism in America against white people, while at the same time saying there's no systematic racism. But people get the message.
Chris Rufo just spent a
Yeah, like Jon Stewart was saying, people do get the message.
month digging into drag queen story hours. He's a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. He joins us tonight. Chris, thanks so much for coming on. What did you find in the month you spent looking at this?
Well, I found that parents' instincts is largely correct. A lot of parents are wondering, why is an adult male putting on women's clothing and dancing and talking about sexual themes with other people's
For note, they weren't talking about sexual themes. They were just reading a children's storybook.
children, not only in libraries, but also...
Note the chyron, kids forced to endure. This is it's no coincidence that shortly after this, a shooting happened, an anti-LGBT shooting, where the shooter referenced Tucker Carlson.
Also in schools and other public institutions, but they're scared to say anything.
It was always the most basic taboo in our society. Stay away from the children, creep, or you will regret it. Why would any parent allow their child to be sexualized by an adult man with a fetish for kids?
That's absolutely scandalous, to go on the most popular news program in America and say this, and of course it is stochastic terrorism. The intention is to incite violence. That is clearly how, that's how I read it, and I can't see how anybody else can read anything, can read it in any other way.
It's something that people should trust their instincts on. People should push back against this. And of course, people should arm themselves with the literature and the people...
Yeah, code words there. Well, not even coding. Yeah, arm themselves with the literature. They know what they're doing.
Advocated for this deeply disturbing sexualization of children.
Yeah, people should definitely arm themselves. I agree with that.
This is horrid. Horrid. Absolutely horrid. This is the person who you call your friend, Tucker Carlson. It's disgusting. This is Tucker Carlson from Tucker Carlson's yearbook. Tucker Carlson wrote in his yearbook from school that he was a member of the Dan White Society. For those unaware of this, the Dan White Society wasn't actually a society at his school. He wrote it in as a dog whistle for white supremacists, for anti-LGBT hate. Dan White was the person who shot and murdered Harvey Milk, the first gay senator in America. He also lists himself as part of the Jesse Helms Foundation, rampant anti-LGBT figure in US politics. This is your friend, is it? Somebody who perpetually, through the course of their career, has stoked fear and hatred against minorities. Okay, let's carry on.
Tucker Carlson, let me say it outright out front, I consider him to be my friend. And the reason I like Tucker Carlson is because I see him as like an old school conservative, maybe, who is willing to just come out and say, I'm a free speech absolutist, I'm absolutely against war. He's come on our shows, he's been clear and open. And I would expect to disagree with anybody on a variety of political subjects, but with Tucker Carlson, I think he has good values and good principles.
So he was rampantly anti-homeless. He said some disgusting things about the homeless. He's been horrible about LGBTs. He constantly dog whistles white supremacist talking points. And Fox News, his previous employer, argued in court that nobody should ever believe him because his opinions are. He wasn't a journalist. He was just an opinions person. And that nobody would naturally believe what he says. It's an entertainment show. This is the kind of liar and misdirector that you're calling a friend. Okay. Right, fine.
Is not what Jon Stewart thinks, though. He thinks that Tucker Carlson ought to be a pariah. I've heard him say that Tucker Carlson is deliberately evil, and on his return to The Daily Show, he's made Tucker Carlson one of his targets, and that makes sense when you understand the old rubric of left versus right.
The old rubric of left versus right, yeah, with right wing being fascism, being authoritarian, totalitarian. On the right, you have fascists like Tucker Carlson, and on the left you have people who are anti-fascists, people who oppose fascism, people who believe that the power should be with the people, like Jon Stewart. Yeah, but when you see it from that traditional lens, yeah, then maybe things make sense. But when you see it from the nothing makes sense, don't trust anything anymore perspective, then maybe we're all in the same boat.
I think politics has changed since Jon Stewart was last on television. Let's be clear here. Jon Stewart is an excellent comedian.
Okay, so he's complimenting him on his comedy. He's avoided giving any credence to his positions. I think that's a position that he'll I think that's something that he'll continue with.
Excellent. He understands comedy. He understands delivery. He understands character. He's an exceptionally gifted comic and I think a vital, incredible voice in our cultural space. That's why I think it's fascinating to see the two of them at loggerheads. But are we going to miss a real opportunity here when...
I mean, all you have to do to understand why they're so different, because Russell Brand is going to great pains here to try and present them as both being on the same side, but maybe not quite understanding that they're on the same side. Go and watch some of Jon Stewart's work, and listen to some of the work of Tucker Carlson, and you'll understand why there is an absolute valley between them. They really are on opposite ends of the spectrum. The only reason why Russell Brand is trying to or having any success as painting them as being the same is precisely because Tucker Carlson and Russell Brand and his ilk all try and obscure their right-wing connections, their fascistic tendencies, because nobody wants to say, hey, I'm a fascist. Most everybody knows that that's not going to go down very well. You know, Hitler didn't come into the what ended up being the Second World War. He didn't go into that period telling everybody, hey, I'm a fascist, I'm going to do all these fascistic things. No, he pretended to be a member of he was a member of the Socialist Party. Not that there was anything socialist about his party. Okay.
Tucker Carlson is a figure of the right, let's say, for simplicity's sake, who is virulent.
For simplicity's sake, because he is. It's funny because he does enough to give people who want to understand him as a non-right-wing character. He does enough to sort of touch on those things, but he minimizes every single point.
Anti-establishment. Jon Stewart is a figure of the left.
So Tucker Carlson is virulently anti-establishment. I mean, he was, as I said, the lead anchor for the largest news organization in America, constantly promoting Republican talking points.
Who is very pro-ordinary working people.
And Jon Stewart is just very pro-ordinary working people. Right, okay.
Who is critical of the establishment and yet is confined to certain areas of topicality, and we'll point them out as we go. But is there more to learn from both of these figures, their popularity and their ability, than we could ever learn from the centralised, homogenised, authoritarian, centralist figures that dominate our cultural space these days? I.e., Jon Stewart is whip funny, fast, amusing, and right on.
He's whip fast, funny, and amusing. Okay, let's just give us, So basically, he's a good comedian and he's right on. Okay, and so this supposed balance. Let's see. Do we get Tucker Carlson being articulate, garrulous, loquacious, and I don't know what else can we say for right on? It doesn't really mean anything.
Carlson understands how to reach a wide audience with ethics and morals that clearly resonate with vast, almost...
So he has skills in reaching a wide audience with ethics and morals. I'm sorry. If you think Tucker Carlson has ethics and morals, then you need to watch the Jon Stewart special on Tucker Carlson.
Incomparable numbers of people. And does it show us in a way that politics and media...
Sorry, John Oliver.
Media have changed since Jon Stewart was last on TV, and if we were to find an energy and a charge between these two poles rather than repulsion in that magnetic power, we might find the source for new political movements that...
What does that even mean? That means nothing. The man says nothing. So if we could find the energy between those two poles, then we might find the energy we need to... What? So you've got a fascist on one side arguing for white supremacy and Putin apologia. And on the other side, you have somebody who is arguing for people, somebody who stood up for those people whose health was affected after 9/11, who was stood up for the transgender children who were being targeted by Republican governors. Jon Stewart is a legend who stands up for people, and Tucker Carlson is a shill. So, I mean, how we find where and what does it even mean to find the energy in between those two positions? He's saying nothing.
It could be a genuine challenge to the American war machine and global corporatism. Let's get into it.
Just out of curiosity, as a student.
Firstly, how Jon Stewart did this was well funny. He sets up the bit that he's like learning from Tucker Carlson as a journalist, and I lie about what you do. He did this in a very, very amusing and brilliant way. As someone who does this kind of thing for a living, when I see Jon Stewart do it, I think, wow, that guy, he's really...
So, I mean, he wants to... I'm guessing the reason why he's complimenting his comedy so thoroughly is because he's completely avoided giving any substance or praise to his political positions. And that, I think, is telling.
Good at this. They turn these ideas around fast. They find the comedy in the ideas. But what I'm interested in is why Jon Stewart never points out that Tucker Carlson is consistently anti-war.
I'm sorry. I'm guessing the reason why he doesn't point out that Tucker Carlson is consistently anti-war is because Tucker Carlson isn't consistently anti-war. Here's a clip from him in the early 2000s, because he keeps on claiming that he was constantly against the Iraq War.
Carries the Joint Direct Attack Munitions, JDAM. It's a GPS-guided bomb, inertial with a satellite update, so it's very, very accurate. You don't have to see the target. You just have to know where it is. You put the coordinates in. The aircraft's flying out of range and probably out of any detection. It's very, very reliable. And we got a lot of them.
How long after that point, General, do ground troops move in?
Well, that's really the commander's call. They could move immediately, or they could wait. But in this case, we've softened up his air defenses. We've got complete air superiority over the southern no-fly zone. So my guess is they'll move pretty quick.
Well, what about Iraq's Scuds? I mean, does Iraq have any that still work, and are they capable of hitting Israel or Qatar or Kuwait?
We think he's got about 24 Scuds. We don't know whether they're workable. Chances are they are. He's going to have to launch them within a certain zone in western Iraq in order to hit Israel. He can't launch them from anywhere because they don't have enough range. He can launch them from south of Baghdad and hit Kuwait. And he has the shorter range, the 90-plus mile Al-Samud 2 missiles that we've been trying to get destroyed. So he does have means of striking friendly countries.
Why is it hard to destroy them? I mean, they must be physically large. Can our satellites determine where they are?
Really pushing back hard there. Yeah, how can we find them? How can we destroy them?
Are they easy to hide?
Well, they were hidden when they were parked during the Gulf War. We spent about 10 years looking at the problem afterwards, and apparently some of them were parked under bridges and things where the satellites just didn't see them.
How big are they? Just give us a sense of what does a Scud look
60 feet long, 70 feet long, big tractor.
Yeah, watch out for these big scary missiles. Really, really pushing back there, weren't you, Tucker? Actually, while we're here, I didn't manage to find. Okay, these are other. Let's come to those. CNN transcripts. Here we go. CNN. I didn't manage to find a video of this, but CNN has transcripts of its news sections, and Tucker Carlson, I think, has been fired from all 4 major news stations in America. Here he is on sometime later on the 7th of April 2004. But here we have a section on the Iraq War. George Bush states, "We will stay the course in Iraq. We are not going to be intimidated by thugs or assassins." The announcer. Plus, what will Condoleezza Rice say about the Bush administration's fight against terrorism before 9/11? Today on Crossfire, that was the program that Tucker Carlson was on. The announcer says, live from George Washington University, Paul Begala and Tucker Carlson. Paul Begala. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Crossfire. Like all Americans, of course, we here at Crossfire are thinking of our brave troops as they fight President Bush's war in Iraq. And Tucker Carlson says, Let's hope those troops are permitted to do whatever they think necessary to control the savages who are trying to kill Americans. Now, we've already heard Tucker Carlson refer to foreigners as savages. It's no news, but he's clearly not being anti-war. Okay, let's carry on.
Watching Jon Stewart deconstruct and attack Tucker Carlson on the basis of his interview with Putin is interesting, but I also would argue this was a really important interview, and that in attacking Tucker Carlson...
Important for what? I mean, certainly it was important for Putin because he's spreading his vision, his propaganda. So, yeah.
Even though he does it brilliantly and amusingly, he is, to a degree, doing the job of the establishment, because if the Democrat Party could press a button...
Okay, that was interesting. Okay, let's listen to that little bit again.
That Tucker Carlson is consistently anti-war. Watching Jon Stewart deconstruct and attack Tucker Carlson on the basis of his interview with Putin is interesting, but I also would argue this was a really important interview, and that in attacking Tucker Carlson, even though he does it brilliantly and amusingly, he is, to a degree, doing the job of the establishment.
Okay, so Jon Stewart here is funny. That's the only compliment he seems to get. He's funny, but also he's doing the work of the establishment, because then the Democrat Party would blah, blah, blah.
If the Democrat Party could press a button and prevent that...
Yeah, so he's conflating there the establishment with the Democratic Party.
Brilliantly and amusingly, he is, to a degree, doing the job of the establishment, because if the Democrat Party could press a button and prevent that interview from...
Okay, so... there's no reason why he should be talking specifically about the Democrat Party. He moves immediately from the establishment to the Democrat, and his talks are full of little elements like this, where it's very easy to miss them in conversation. But there's no reason why he should conflate the Democratic Party with the establishment, and there are plenty of establishment members who are pro-Russia. You know, let's have a look at some of them. I had some of the so pro-Putin Republicans break ranks by heaping praise on the Kremlin, how Putin co-opted the Republican Party. There's plenty of people in the Republican Party who are apologizing for Russia, who are shilling Russia talking points. And let's not forget the Putin fan in chief, Donald Trump.
I do have a relationship with him. He is a tough cookie.
He's big, he's strong. Strong man, big, tough guy.
Putin even sent me a present. Beautiful present with a beautiful note.
He says great things about me. I'm going to say great things about him.
This is made by the Midas Touch Network. You should probably look at some of their stuff if you want to be properly informed about American politics.
I like Putin, he likes me.
I like it.
Great work by the Midas Touch Network. Trump was the leader of the establishment. He is a billionaire. He is establishment in terms of business. He is establishment in terms of global trade. And he is establishment in terms of politics. So, you know, the idea that the establishment is a war machine rampant for destroying Putin, and the anti-establishment voices are somehow against this, is a false narrative. So, let's carry on.
Happening, they would have pressed that button, because I think millions of people who never would have had access to it before saw Vladimir Putin clearly conveying a very particular perspective, which could be called easily propaganda, but certainly...
It's so he equivocates on all of the points. He likes to say them, and he likes to downplay and equivocate on them. It's his idea of balance.
Including like we.
I don't think he really thinks that it's balance. I think that he likes to appear balanced, and so that's why he throws them in.
We are interested in a diplomatic solution. We always made it clear that if Ukraine joined NATO, it'd be a problem. And not only that, these are things that we were all aware of and
these are all talking points for Russia. He's going on to.
And subsequently, even
these are all Putin talking points. It's just a long narrative. He's just given out the Russian narrative. He's not doing anything for the narrative from Jon Stewart.
And yet acknowledge Tucker Carlson's right, and therefore his audience's right, to share the views that they clearly do and to oppose the opinions of Jon Stewart. But
okay, see, this is very one-sided. It would be very easy to watch this if you're coming from the perspective of it's okay to challenge and I'm going to accept his narratives. It's very easy to see how you would, if you were taking this in good faith and not paying attention to all of the details of how he phrases things, it would be very easy to miss because he is complimentary about Jon Stewart, although only about his comedies selectively. And he does question things, but he only questions them to whip them straight back and challenge them immediately with the narrative that fits his donors.
Find common ground when it comes to a general agreement that you can't trust the American military-industrial complex, a subject upon which Tucker Carlson is very strong and to which this interview is integrally related. Because isn't the big establishment fear here that we'll hear Vladimir Putin say stuff that makes us not want to fund an ongoing Ukraine-Russia war? And haven't you already heard a bunch of stuff that makes you think that diplomacy might be better than continuing to allow Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, etc., all to profit from that ongoing war?
When you're sitting there interviewing Putin and you don't plan to challenge his utter bullshit, but you don't want to really be that obvious, what do you do with your face? Oh, I see. Okay, so it's not really a straight face as much as you try to convey a mixture of what appears to be shame, arousal, and I'm going to say irregularity. For instance, like you're constipated while jerking off to a Sears catalog.
This
is a funny moment. It was a funny moment, but it wasn't a substantive moment, was it? It was more of a shallow ad hominem attack on Tucker Carlson and his ridiculous face. I mean, it did make brief reference to the fact that he didn't really give any critical comment, but it didn't really pick up anything substantive. Be interesting to see whether Russell Brand actually decides to engage with any of the substantive arguments from Jon Stewart.
It shows you the power of comedy, because that's an entirely constructed idea designed to ridicule, and it's a successful one, and
so it's an entirely constructed idea designed to ridicule. Okay, right. So he's instantly dismissing the idea as just being constructed for ridicule. And there we go. So that's all he's boiled it down to.
Kind of thing that comedians should be able to do and clearly do rather well. And it's one of the things that's slowly getting extricated from our culture, the ability to be cruel in good faith. Although this...
It really isn't. The ability to be cruel to those powerless below you is called bullying, and that has fallen out of favour. The ability to ridicule those who have more power in, and basically essentially any other way other than bullying, that's still fine. But if you're rich and you're powerful and you're Tucker Carlson or somebody else who resents being mocked, then you'll have a platform to stand up and whine about how you're being cancelled.
This is, of course, not a well-intended bit. This is a polarising bit. I maintain Jon Stewart is...
He mentioned earlier on those who attempt to polarise us are evil. Well, he didn't say evil. He said he said it. I forget how he phrased it, but he definitely, at the beginning, he referenced the fact that polarization was a really real negative influence. He also said the middle ground is some kind of homogenous space, again, associated with negative priorities, negative motivations. The only area that's really left for us is the right.
an anti-establishment figure when it comes to being critical of corruption. Did you see his interview with that Pentagon official when it came to the subject of failing audits?
An $850 billion budget to an organization that can't pass an audit and tell you where that money went.
Okay, so now he's giving him some substantive points. Unfortunately, he's veered off the subject of Russia and Tucker Carlson. He's only giving them substantive points where they relate to something else that happens to align with his donors.
We can't make this content without the support of our fantastic partners.
And that would be the attacks on the FBI and all of the institutions which Trump has found himself butting up against with his many, many laws and rules that he's broken.
Look at this glorious apple. Why, it's like the fruit of Eden. Indeed, it is.
I'm not going to watch
The reason for that is apple stem cells.
I'm not going to listen to his sponsor talks. Oh, there's a lot of them. He's spraying himself with everything.
Simple choice, really. This
are in the realm of waste, fraud, or abuse, because they would wonder why that money isn't well accounted for.
What I'm trying to drive us towards here is the possibility of a kind of acceptance that there's a space that's neither Democrat or Republican in the former sense, but is a more decentralized, autonomous, truly democratic, anti-establishment position. Could it ever emerge?
Here we go. So I guess you put in 10...
Now, this is the section where Tucker Carlson loses his mind over how great it is to be able to take out a trolley with a coin, showing his great connection to the working people. Yeah, we already knew this a long time ago, Tucker.
Rubles here, and you get it back when you put the cart back.
Now, possibly with his well-intentioned and enthusiastic appraisal of Russian supermarkets, Tucker may not have done himself any favours.
Yeah, you're right. He looked like an absolute shill. It was very clear that that's what he was doing.
So it's free, but there's an incentive to return it and not just bring it to your homeless encampment.
Oh, wow.
I didn't realize America's homeless problem is caused entirely by easy access to grocery carts. I had all my stuff in my house, but I didn't know that you put it on wheels. It's so much easier.
But it's odd, actually, because what is causing...
Again, that wasn't really a substantive attack. There was nothing there that was really presented other than just sort of mocking.
America's homeless crisis, lack of infrastructure, lack of support, and where are those resources currently going? Evidently to the Pentagon, to the ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia, the Middle East.
It keeps on boiling everything down to the funding of the war. If he wants to make a point on homelessness, maybe he should bring up the part where even he challenges Tucker on his dubious past with homelessness.
Eastern wars that are escalating. So I suppose what I'm inviting is a spirit of conviviality, mutual acceptance, trust, and even love. Even though I adore comedy, I adore ridicule, I adore the ability to poke fun and even attack in good spirits. And both of these men are, in the case of Tucker Carlson, a person I consider a friend. In the case of Jon Stewart, a person I admire. But in terms of how is this playing out in the media? How is this playing out in the culture? And isn't it possible that what we're missing here in this polarity is the opportunity to identify, acknowledge, and move into new cultural spaces rather than let this just sink into the morass of the culture war as just tit for tat spat that don't really go anywhere?
Right. Okay. But I mean, does that actually mean anything? Does that actually move us anywhere? Does that do anything for us? I don't think so. I mean,
isn't it possible that what we're missing here in this polarity is...
So we're too polarised and we're missing
the opportunity to identify, acknowledge, and move into new cultural spaces.
Okay, so we should be moving into new cultural spaces. Which spaces, Brand?
Rather than let this just sink into the morass of the culture war as just tit for tat spat that don't really go anywhere.
So we should use this to move into a new cultural space instead of considering this as a tit for tat. We shouldn't be thinking about this as a tit for tat. We can't let it settle into some tit for tat. This is a moral and principled comedian dismantling a pseudo journalist, proto-fascist.
Perhaps if your handlers had allowed, you would have seen there is a hidden fee to your cheap groceries and orderly streets. Ask Alexei Navalny or any of his supporters.
And finally, we come to a substantive point.
In Vladimir Putin's Russia, political repression is everywhere. And hundreds have been arrested for daring to honor Navalny so publicly.
Right.
This is a point where you have to question the legitimacy and editorialization that's happening literally in that moment.
And so he does it instantly to dismantle it. He's trying, so he lets Jon Stewart make one substantive point, and he's already trying to dismiss it as being edited.
It would be a perfect opportunity, one might say, for Julian Assange's name to come to
or instantly, divert to a different story.
The forefront of this show's mind, Julian Assange.
Don't think about Alexei Navalny. Don't think about that. We don't want you thinking about that. Why don't you think about WikiLeaks instead?
Who's in prison awaiting potential extradition to the United States for journalism. And now we, of course, are beginning to understand that it's likely that Navalny died of a blood clot.
Right. Okay. So now we're finding out that Navalny, who was healthy until going back to Russia, where everyone was afraid that he might lose his life because Vladimir Putin kills his political opponents, he arrives in Russia and dies shortly after, in jail, after he's been arrested. Right, okay, this is shameless propaganda. I don't know how much more of this I can take. And all of these people like Brand and Tucker Carlson, who dismiss any criticism of them as being purely based on the fact that they're talking truth to power. People are only bringing this up because I'm speaking truth to power. It's all because I'm speaking truth to power. Well, do you know what? I'm going to leave this with Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson, who, when he was considering the narrative tools of Pat Buchanan, who was a politician in America, who would constantly use the same technique. And Tucker Carlson said this.
I mean, Pat does raise issues that I think are important. Unfortunately, Pat Buchanan raises them in a way that I think is discredited. And when attacked, he can always fall back on the line, well, the tiny cabal that controls American politics doesn't like me because I speak truth to power. This is actually, incidentally, almost verbatim what he said the other day, that I offend the plutocracy, that I'm a wanted man by the inside the Beltway people, and in every sense cast himself as a victim who is sort of a Karen Silkwood of politics, someone who's so truthful that he's being hunted down by the conspiracy that runs Washington. I mean, it's all a bit much.
It's all a bit much. Yeah, you're right, Tucker. It is all a bit much. And that is the same argument you make and the same argument that Russell Brand makes. They're all a bunch of shills. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you again.